Hello, brilliant minds. Welcome to another episode of Research Methodology with Dr. Pree. And today we are going to be talking about your first meeting with your supervisor or with your potential supervisor. This can be a daunting experience for some people, especially if it is not online and if it is in person. You don't know how formal you should be. You don't know if you're supposed to bring something along with you. You don't know what you're supposed to say. Are you supposed to have questions? Are you supposed to have printed, articles with you? Are you supposed to have a notebook and a pen? Are you supposed to dress in a suit and a tie? Are you supposed to be wearing high heels? Are you supposed to be in a dress? And so if you are a little bit lost on how, to present yourself during that first meeting, then this episode is for you. All right. So as usual, on this channel, one of the things that makes us unique is that we always try and use an everyday simple analogy to explain various concepts. So just take your first meeting with your supervisor as you going for a job interview. All right. So with the job interview, you dress well, you prepare yourself well. For most job interviews, they actually tell you that they're expecting you to come with a few questions at the end of the day. And ask your interviewer, at least 2 or 3 questions. So all of the aspects or factors that you would put together when preparing for a job interview, do the same thing for this first meeting with your supervisor. But the catch is that you already have the job, honey. You already know that this person is going to be your supervisor. And so don't feel put under pressure to be so impressive. This first meeting is to basically gauge whether you guys are going to have a good relationship moving forward and if you guys are the best fit for each other. So it's not necessarily that your supervisor is out to get you and wants to know everything that you know. They just want to have a sense of what the working relationship is going to be between you and them moving forward for the duration of your program. So let me give you 5 things that you have to make sure that you do or you prepare for before your meeting. So please don't go to this meeting blank. All right. Remember that it is sort of an interview or a test to see how we're going to work out, our relationship, for the rest of your program or the rest of your degree. So these are 5 things that I think should be necessary for you to have or necessary for you to prepare for that first meeting. So number 1, have your research interest ready. All right. So if it is a paragraph, if it is a 1-page research interest summary, at least have an idea of what you would like to study or what you would like to do, what type of research you would like to do for the duration of your program. It does not need to be a full proposal. These are things that you're going to learn along the way, especially if you are just starting out from your undergrad and you're going into, let's say, an honors program. All right. You don't need to have a full proposal at hand. You just need to have something to show that you have done, some reading, which goes to the next thing. At least have 2 to 3 research questions, that you are considering. All right. At some point in time, we're going to have a video about that on how you can put together your research questions. All right. It doesn't have to be perfect. They just need to be questions surrounding your research interest, some of the things that you'd like to find out, within your topic of interest. I hope you still remember that there is a difference between your research topic and your research title. So even if you don't have a title on hand, at least have a research area or niche, your topic, and then 2 or 3 questions, key questions that you would like to find out from that topic of interest. And at least show that you have been doing some sort of reading, which leads me to my 3rd point, which is at least go and find 2 to 3 key articles that you have read around this particular subject, So show some initiatives, show that, you are interested in this area and that you're not just going to be somebody who's going to sit around waiting for information to be dashed off to you. You have got to show some sort of interaction. Okay. Show that you've already started engaging with literature. So at least have 2 to 3 articles or 2 to 3 sources where you have read a little bit, about your topic. Number 4, which a lot of people take for granted, is have a notebook and a pen. If you are somebody who is old-fashioned like me, you can actually have a diary, a physical notebook and a pen. If not, have your phone on you and actually tell your supervisor that you're taking notes, on your phone. Or if you have a note taker, that's even better. If you're even able to record this meeting between you and, your potential supervisor, please ask them for permission to record the meeting and go ahead and do that so that you can always refer back to that conversation. And then number 5, what are the questions that you have for them? These do not necessarily have to be really, really heavy, heartfelt questions, So I have genuine questions about, what is your expectancy? What are the expectations that you have, for me in this program? What are the preferred communication styles that you would prefer? How frequently should we meet, throughout our relationship? So things like that. Whatever questions that you think will help you along with your working relationship with your supervisor, have those questions ready. Now, I want to give you a few tips on a few scripts that you can use for real moments within or between you and your supervisor during this first meeting. All right. If, for example, they were to ask you that, what exactly is your research about, or what topic do you have in mind? All right. Don't say something along the lines of, I'm not really sure yet, I'm just interested in your, in education, or I'm just interested in humanities. I'm just interested in, just being here, or just doing my master's, or just doing, my PhD. All right. Unless it is clearly stated, and these are things that you'll find out during your first meeting, that, your supervisor is going to give you a topic and a title. Then, you can ask questions from that perspective. And that's kind of like, okay, not to have everything figured out. This is very common, let's say, for example, within the sciences, where you already have a supervisor who already has a niche area. And therefore, they would want, somebody with this sort of skill set, or somebody who's interested in this area, to come into their lab or to come into their space and, do a research. And in most cases, you'll find that they'll give you a topic themselves, or they'll give you a research title themselves. But if you are within one of the disciplines where you're expected to come up with your own topic and your own title, then it's extremely important to have something to say when you're asked, what are your research interests? What is your research niche area? What are you interested in doing? Your response should sound something like, oh, I'm interested in exploring blah, 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 blah. If you're able to put a context to that, then that's fine. I've already started reading around, this area, and I'm still, sort of refining my focus, and I would love your input on how to narrow this down. This works because it actually shows direction. It shows that you're not pretending, to have all of the answers, up front. It also shows, your supervisor that you're interested in collaboration. You take note that they're an expert in this field, and you actually want their input within, your research. All right. Number 2 scenario. Let's say that they say something that you do not understand. So let's say, for example, they have put in a, big word within their conversation, like, I don't know, pedagogy or something like that. And you genuinely don't understand what they're talking about, what those terms mean. Or maybe let's say during conversation, they're talking about, abbreviations, and you're just literally lost. Do not pretend as if you know what they're talking about, because honestly speaking, this is going to bite you in the ass later on. All right. Don't do that. Okay. Always make sure that you ask them. Like I said, in previous episodes, if you knew all the answers, or if you knew everything, you wouldn't be in school in the first place. And a good supervisor is well aware of the fact that you don't have all of the answers. All right. So say something along the lines of, oh, could you please explain what you meant when you said blah, 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 blah? Or can you please explain the term pedagogy? Because I'd really like to make sure that I'm following you correctly. And I'd like to make sure that I'm following along with this conversation. All right? A good supervisor will actually respect the fact that you're being intellectually honest. That you're not feigning, to know everything in the world. You're not feigning to be the star student. Asking clarification is a sign of engagement. All right. It's not a sign of ignorance. It actually shows that you are engaging in the conversation. You are listening to the conversation. You're going along with it. You're not just sitting there passively and, taking information that you are going to struggle to understand later on, even when you have a recording at hand. So ask for clarification, especially within the context of your topic, because sometimes you might think that you understand a term, or you might think that you understand what they're talking about, but maybe they're not talking about it the way that you think. Perhaps they're talking about it in a particular context of what your project is going to be. So always make sure that you ask for clarification. Number 3 scenario, which is extremely important, is when they ask you about your timeline. All right. So especially if you have designed or you are expected to kind of design your project. All right. Never say, oh, I've not thought about, my timeline, or I'm waiting for you to give me the answer of that. Remember that your program is set within a particular time frame. You have got to make sure that your project is doable, within this time frame. All right. Even if you haven't really thought about it, say something along the lines of, oh, I've registered at this point in time, I'm not really sure, for example, when, my final project is supposed to be handed in by, I assume it's supposed to be around, this time. So I was hoping that, we could come up with a sort of Gantt chart on, the steps that, will be required for me, in my project. We could map out, some of the milestones together. And what do you think would be a realistic time target for me? Or I would really like your input when it comes to this area. All right. So it kind of shows that, you have put some thought into, your time frame or into your timing, and also, again, it invites them to show out their experiences and their expertise in this field. There's a lot of temptation, which is why a supervisor's guidance is very, very important, to try and solve every problem and to answer every research question within, your program. And sometimes that is not feasible. It might seem feasible to you, but because a supervisor has done this before, gone through various milestones with various students, and they kind of have an idea of what is expected within a time frame, they'll be able to give you advice in terms of what is doable within your time frame and what is not doable. Okay, so you stating that also establishes, a collaborative tone, that you want their experience to show forth, and you want their expertise as well. Here are some certain things that will make your supervisor's eye twitch and will make your supervisor think, maybe you're not so ready for this. All right. Do not or never, or try as much as possible not to say the following 6 things. Number 1, I want to finish my program very quickly. Number 2, I already know exactly what my results may look like. Number 3, I haven't had time to read anything yet. Number 4, my previous supervisor told me that this topic was fine. Number 5, can't you just tell me what to do or what to research? And number 6, I don't really have any questions. Let's break these aspects down. All right. So I just want to finish quickly. This shows that you aren't really interested in the program itself. Did you come and do a master's or a PhD because you don't have anything else to do? Because you're sitting at home and you just feel bored? That's what it sounds like when you just say that, oh, I just want to finish this quickly. It just kind of shows that, oh, this is just a tick box and I want to just get it over and done with. And, perhaps to you, this might be okay. Rather keep it to yourself because, your supervisor might hear it differently from the way that you are thinking it. Maybe it is a tick box to you because, to be honest, there are some professions where, you're working somewhere and you're told, listen, if you want a promotion, go and do your master's or go and do a PhD. And it is actually a requirement or a tick box for you, but never give that impression to your supervisor. It doesn't set a good tone at all. Number 2, research always follows evidence. All right. So never say things along the lines of, oh, I already know what my results are, exactly what my results are going to be. You could have an idea of what your results could eventually be. You could hypothesize what your results could actually be. But, you saying things like that is, a red flag. Research always follows the evidence. All right. And not the other way around. Right? If you know what your results are going to be before collecting those results, then at the end of the day, you are just putting together a report. It's not research, to begin with. All right. Number 3, I haven't had time to read anything yet. All right. Even if it is one article that you go and read, and you don't even need to read it fully, skim through, read just the abstract. Read the introduction, read the conclusion, just have an idea of a source that you have read. It shows or it implies that you are somebody who's ready to drive, the process. It shows that you are being interactive. It shows that, you are interested in what you're doing. So never say and never do something along the lines of not going and reading at least something around your topic of interest beforehand. Number 4, if let's say you were within another program, something happened along those lines, there have been issues where, a supervisor, for example, has passed away, or you had issues within your previous institution, whatever the reason may be, and you are now needed to change, your supervisor. Start from a clean slate. Start from a blank slate. Don't bring in your past mistakes or your past failures into this new era now. Try as much as possible to start blank. It automatically creates some sort of defensiveness to say that, oh, my previous supervisor, is actually better than you and something like that. I'm not really saying that you should strike your supervisor's ego, but it just doesn't seem nice or look nice, to say things like that, especially if you are starting from scratch or especially if you're starting afresh. It's a different conversation altogether. If, let's say, your supervisor has passed away, you have done, your research project up to a certain point, and maybe a co-supervisor has to now come on board, then that's a different conversation altogether. But if you are changing the program, you're changing the project, you're changing everything, just start afresh. Start from a clean slate. All right? Number 4, unless it is very clear that your supervisor is going to give you a topic as well as a title, do not say along the lines of, oh, can't you just tell me what to research? All right. There are better ways of expressing this. The research generally should be yours. All right. So you should have something in mind that you're interested in. Okay. A supervisor's job, really 80% of the time, is to guide you along your research journey and not necessarily to dish out, things to you. You could, have it at the back of your mind that, hey, you would like, to do something different and you would prefer to do something along the lines of what perhaps your supervisor is interested in. I've had a student where, they made it plain that, hey, I'm interested in this. This is what I do in my career, but I would also like to explore other areas of research. And therefore I would, prefer it if we could, sit down and have a discussion on what you would suggest a good topic or a good title for me is. that's a much better approach than saying, hey, you know what, just give me whatever, you have, whatever comes to mind. I'm good, Remember that it's supposed to be a collaborative thing. All right. And even within your subsequent meetings, when that happens, then go back, do some reading and see, is it something that you're really interested in? We have a lot of cases where, students came blank. Supervisors gave them, what they had in mind, their own research interests. And at the end of the day, the student struggles along the way because, honestly speaking, it's not something that they would have typically wanted to do. So also make sure that you go back and do the homework, and we'll talk about scenarios like that perhaps in another episode. And number 6, I don't really have any questions. Always have a question. It could be a general question. Generally speaking, it should be something along the lines of your project, but just don't leave there without showing that this is a collaborative thing. Okay, so always have questions. What are some of the things that your supervisor is actually thinking about in your first meeting? They're thinking mainly about 4 things. Number 1, is this student going to drive the process, or are they going to wait for me to do it? A lot of supervisors will tell you that, listen, I already have a PhD. I shouldn't be doing another PhD through you. Okay. So they'll want to know, are you going to be proactive or not? And they're going to be able to see this in your first meeting. Number 2, they're asking themselves, have you done any reading at all? Have you done any form of homework? So always make sure that you have. Number 3, can I work with this person, for the next few months or for the next few years? As important as your research project is, your working relationship with your supervisor is just as important. There are various people that I've come across who would tell you, listen, my supervisor is brilliant, but their personality sucks like hell, and you are saying this from your point of view, but a supervisor is also trying to see from their point of view that, listen, can I work with this person? Are they able to take feedback? Are they able to take suggestions? How exactly is my communication style with them? Are they too passive? Are they too forceful? Are we able to actually have a conversation? You have to understand that your postgraduate study or your postgraduate journey is different from undergraduate level. Undergraduate, your lecturer tells you do this, or your lecturer tells you this is what you should go and study. You go and write a test, and that's that. But with a postgraduate study, no matter how old you are, the relationship or the dynamics of that program is different. You are taken more at a mature level. You're taken more at an adult, sort of level. So they need to see, am I able to work with this person moving forward? And even for you yourself as a postgraduate student, also try and see from the character of the supervisor whether you'll be able to work with this person moving forward or not. And then number 4, is this topic or this title that this student coming up with, is it going to be doable in the amount of time that they have? They are already starting to have mental calculations in their mind whether your project is actually doable. And actually, you'll find that perhaps some of the ideas that you come with, maybe they'll, to you, it might seem as if they're trying to, debunk them, or they're trying to dismiss you. And that might not necessarily be the case. They are probably trying to scope down or narrow down your work in a way that you'll be able to finish. Because if you don't finish in time, that also has a domino effect on them. All right. So once again, always arrive with questions and leave with clarity. What are some of the questions that you could ask during this first meeting? Ask about expectations. So how often would you like us to meet? What would you prefer that I bring to each session? Have conversations, have questions about milestones. What would you as a supervisor find is a realistic first milestone? And even after we have achieved this milestone, what's the next thing that you want to see from me? All right. So I have done A, what is B? All right. Or what would you like to see after B when we have, that meeting, and questions about the topic. So based on what I have shared, are there any gaps, in my thinking of what I should address first. This shows a supervisor that, you're being proactive, about your topic. Always ask questions about communication. What is the best way that you would like me as a student to reach you as a supervisor? Is it okay if I have your number and can I send you a WhatsApp message? When should I not send you messages? Nobody wants to get messages or WhatsApp messages after 8 p.m., for example, because that's perhaps family time. Would you prefer that I come to your office physically? Would you prefer a Teams meeting? Would you prefer email? Ask questions about feedback. How would you prefer, to give feedback? Or how would you expect to receive feedback from them? They'll tell you that, okay, when you give me your work, I'm going to give you written comments on, your written work. Would you prefer verbal discussions? Would you prefer both? Whatnot. Okay. And then lastly, ask questions about reading. So perhaps you have come up with 2 to 3 sources, but maybe they are not 2 to 3 key sources. So depending on the topic and depending on the title, ask them that, okay, this area, do you perhaps know any 3 key sources that maybe I should start off, by reading? You'll find that, within various disciplines, you'll actually find that there are certain key authors, within that discipline or within that niche area that, if you've not started reading in this area, then you have not just started reading about this topic at all. And your supervisor will be able to give you, those sources that, okay, start with these 3 sources and then you can build, your literature from there. When your meeting is over, always make sure that, you send a follow-up email that, okay, these are the things that we discussed within our meetings. I just wanted to say thank you, for your time, of being able to meet you. And this is what we discussed. These are the first few milestones that I'll now, get ready. And this is extremely important because it leaves a paper trail. You can always go back to refer to it. Your supervisor can also go back and refer to that. And there will be an episode where we'll be talking about, navigating such issues. A lot of things that come up is because you don't have evidence to show that this conversation happened between you and your supervisor. And so an email will help you to document that. Within 1 or 2 weeks, act on what was spoken about. If your supervisor said that, hey, your first milestone is going to be, okay, you've given me your topic. Your first milestone is going to be come up with a research title. At least within a week or 2, try and make sure that you have acted on that. All right. Keep a supervision log, so document every meeting. The date, what was discussed. It goes back to the first thing that I was saying. You can do this very well within a follow-up email, and if possible, schedule when your next meeting is going to be. So if you've had a meeting today, your next meeting, are you going to meet? And this comes once again, with the clarification questions that you would have asked. That are we going to meet frequently? Are we going to meet once a week? Are we going to meet once every 2 weeks? Are we going to meet 2 times a month? What exactly is the arrangement there? So try and make sure that you schedule when your next meeting is going to be, so that between the time that you have had this meeting and the next time your next meeting comes along, then you should have done something in between. So remember that your first meeting will set the tone for your supervision and student relationship journey moving forward. All right. Always remember that supervision is not a hierarchy. It's not you, answering to somebody who holds all the power in their hands. Okay. Well, this isn't an ideal situation anyway. At its best, your partnership between you and your supervisor is a collaborative fit. It is a collaborative intellectual partnership. All right. So you bring your topic, you bring your curiosity, you bring, your research questions, and your supervisor guides you along the way. They'll give you their experience, they'll give you their networks, and they'll give you their knowledge of the field. And together you can produce something that the two of you apart would not have been able to produce. So the nugget that I want to leave for you today is that a good supervision relationship is not built in one meeting, but a very bad one can start from that first meeting. So always make sure that this first meeting counts.